As the movie begins, we see a funeral of a guy named Darren Shan, who is alive underneath a coffin while his family and friends grieve over his death. Darren explains how everything was going pretty well in his life. He's popular at school, his parents are happy, he's getting good grades, but the only thing that is unstable in his life is his best friend Steve. One day, Steve manages to make Darren bunk the class and go to the rooftop. As they both sit together, Darren gets a hold of a spider, but Steve crushes it and shows his unruliness by smashing the light bulbs with the stones. Steve challenges him to join him as well, and Darren agrees. Meanwhile, their teacher is giving lectures to the students and catches Darren smashing the light bulbs with the stones. Next, we see Darren's parents scolding him and putting all the blame on his best friend Steve. His parents warn Darren to stay away from Steve. Furthermore, his father forces him to study well, get a job, and start a family. The thoughts keep ringing in his mind, but he ultimately snaps out of it. The following day, on the way to the school, Darren tells Steve that his parents have forced him to end their friendship. Steve becomes heartbroken and states that Darren will never stand up for himself or anyone else. As they were arguing, a strange man in the car throws a flyer out of the window, which turns out to be an invitation to the Cirque du Freak, which is a freak show. Both of them get excited and want to go to the freak show. Back in the class, their teacher finds the freak show card and warns them not to attend it for some reason. Despite their teacher's warning, both Darren and Steve sneak out of their houses and reach the local theater on their bicycles. Darren explains how Steve is obsessed with vampires while he's addicted to spiders. They proceed ahead to the ticket area where they see some creature in a hidden cabinet. The creature then bites Steve's hand while he gives them money and hides away. Steve recoils in fear, and the creature throws the tickets on the floor and runs away. Upon entering the building, they come face to face with a tall man who takes their tickets and tells them to go forward. Both of them enter the theater and sit among the crowd. Mr. Tall then arrives on the stage and starts the freak show. At first, a wrecking beast called the Wolfman makes an entrance and scares everyone. Mr. Tall directs him to a woman. The Wolfman then bites off the arms of the woman. As everyone screams in fear, that woman charmingly regenerates her cut-off arm and gets introduced as Korma Limbs. The next freak comes on named Alexander Ribs, with no ribs in his body. Then Gertha Teeth, who has immensely strong teeth, comes next. Immediately after Gertha, we witness Ramus Two Bellies, with actual two bellies. He engulfs everything and spits out a tricycle from his mouth, and he rides it away. The next freak comes out to be Evra the Snake Boy, who performs music, but his snake named Bippo eats up the amplifier, so Mr. Tall sends him away. Afterwards comes the enchanting Madame Truska, who takes Darren as a volunteer, but she envisions something about him and immediately moves away. Her freakishness is then revealed as she suddenly grows a beard. Nevertheless, she cuts it and retreats. The next presenter is Larten Crepsley, who comes out with his spider named Madame Octa. He takes out the flute and they both dance together. As Crepsley performs, Steve tells Darren that Crepsley is a vampire named Vor Horsten, who is over 100 years old. Another elderly strange man named Gavnir Purl, who is sitting beside Steve and Darren, overhears them. As Crepsley's performance is going on, suddenly Octa flies into the air and drops on Darren's lap. He becomes mesmerized by the spider, but Crepsley takes it back immediately. Moments later, the theater gets invaded by the townspeople, including their teacher and the local police. As Mr. Tall argues with them, Alexander comes and scares them away. Meanwhile, Darren is fascinated by Crepsley's spider, Madame Octa. He goes backstage and impulsively steals her, but is forced to hide when Crepsley returns to his green room along with Gavnir. Crepsley and Gavnir discuss how the Vampanese is becoming a threat to them after murdering their friend Vincent. Furthermore, a fat man named Mr. Tiny is back and he's planning to destroy them all by messing with the Book of Souls. Therefore, they must fight the Vampanese off. Upon that, Crepsley states that he has left that life and can't do it. Just then, Steve arrives and explains that he knows the truth about Crepsley. Steve begs to be made into a vampire because there's nobody in his life. His father is lost, his mother is drunk most of the time, but Crepsley refuses after tasting Steve's blood, which he says tastes of evil. Next, when Crepsley realizes that Madame Octa was stolen, Darren flees from the theater with Crepsley in pursuit. He escapes when the mysterious Mr. Tiny arrives in his limousine, accompanied by Merlot. The latter is unimpressed with Darren, dismissing him as a bag of blood. but Tiny promises to stay in touch after dropping Darren off at his home. The following morning, Darren secretly brings Madame Octo to school. When Darren tries to feed Octo, Steve jumps upon him and forces him to take a look at Octo. As he stares at it, Steve accidentally drops it and Octo escapes. After a struggle in a crowded hallway, Madame Octo bites Steve on the neck, leaving him to succumb to her deadly venom in the hospital. Darren returns to the theater and begs Crepsley for help. Initially annoyed and contemptuous, Crepsley agrees in the condition that Darren becomes a half-vampire and Crepsley's assistant. Darren agrees. Afterward, Crepsley turns him into a half-vampire by exchanging his blood with Darren by piercing Darren's fingertips. Following the transfer, Crepsley orders him to hop on his back. Just as Darren does that, he swooshes into space and speeds up to the hospital, where they both climb the wall and enter Steve's room. There, Steve lay with his face completely poisoned. Luckily, Crepsley's antidote works and Steve starts to breathe, but just as the work gets done, Darren raises the alarm and Crepsley disappears before warning him not to kill his own family. In the next scene, we witness Darren becoming highly energetic. He welcomes Steve with excessive energy and proceeds to eat raw meat from the fridge. Furthermore, Darren gets tempted to bite his sister's neck and kill her, but moments later, he returns to his senses and moves away. Later that night, Crepsley appears in his room and Darren complains about the temptations. Crepsley tells Darren that he must leave his family and do what he has to play dead, to which Darren agrees. He then spends the last moments with his parents. After giving a goodbye kiss to his younger sister, he sits on the roof with Crepsley. Crepsley then gives him a liquid to drink. Upon drinking it, Darren's senses start becoming numb. Just then, Crepsley snaps his neck and kills him. The next day, a funeral is held where everyone is crying at Darren's coffin. Steve complains and leaves his phone in his hands. But as the coffin is closed, Darren wakes up and starts playing games on his phone. Later that night, Crepsley digs up the grave to free Darren, but Merlot ambushes them. Crepsley fights him off, and the two go to the Cirque du Freak winter campgrounds. Soon, we see Crepsley talking to Mr. Tall about giving a place to Darren so that he can be saved from Mr. Tiny. As they talk, Darren eavesdrops on them and meets a girl named Rebecca. She also joins Darren in the eavesdropping. Mr. Tall then finally agrees to keep Darren. Suddenly, Mr. Tall catches him eavesdropping and asks Rebecca to accompany him to Everest's tent, who will be his roommate. On their way, the Harkett tries to bite his hand again, but Madame Truska intervenes and gets another vision of the future, but she ignores it and lets Darren move on. After a brief walk, he approaches the tent and meets Evra the Snake Boy. Evra tells Darren all the rules and demands him to stay away from his recording studio. Darren agrees to everything happily, and they both shake hands in agreement. In the meantime, Madame Truska fights with Crepsley upon his sudden disappearance. Crepsley gives the reasoning that he was busy and proceeds to calm his partner down, accomplishing it. In the next scene, Steve, who is contemplating suicide after losing his best friend, is stopped by Mr. Tiny. Mr. Tiny offers him a chance to become a Vampanese, a race of vampires who, unlike Crepsley and others, murder their victims to feed on their blood. Steve agrees. On the other hand, we see Darren spending his time in the circle, getting accustomed to the people of the area and talking to them. He follows the chores that Crepsley gives to him, including cleaning and feeding the creatures. Moreover, he practices his flitting skills, but fails miserably by crashing into a signboard. Later that night, Darren sits with the freaks around the fire and observes the absurdities they perform. Later on, we see Darren talking with Evra, who states that the camp has been his family his whole life. The thoughts of family and friends make Darren go through the pictures of himself and Steve. He is ultimately forced to give a phone call to his friend, but Crepsley catches him and breaks the phone. At midnight, we see Mr. Tiny arrives at the camp and all the creatures run up to him in admiration. Next, we see Mr. Tall's tent where Mr. Tiny asks Mr. Tall and Crepsley to hand over Darren to him, but they refuse and the meeting ends. As Mr. Tiny leaves the camp, he orders his creatures to keep an eye on Darren. The following day, the small creatures follow Darren throughout the camp as he works. He goes to meet Rebecca in the costume store. Inside, Darren tries new pants and asks Rebecca about her anomaly. She then reveals that she's a monkey girl and has a tail. Later that night, Crepsley takes Darren outside to test his strength and survival skills. At first, Darren fails to defend himself, much less inflict harm on Crepsley. But gradually, he sharpens his reflexes as a weaponized dagger. Crepsley gives him the idea to use his fingernails, but it turns out that Darren's qualities need a lot of replenishment. On the other hand, Steve gets transformed into a vampire by Merlot. They both proceed to Steve's teacher, Mr. Kersey's home, and together they threaten him. Ultimately, Steve takes over and murders him to drink his blood ruthlessly. Meanwhile, Crepsley takes Darren with him to feed on blood so that he can get the energy to become capable of fighting. He then sedates a farmer harmlessly and offers Darren to drink his blood. The goodness in him doesn't let him get a taste, and they eventually leave. Later that night, while Crepsley is talking with Truska, he senses that the camp has been invaded by Vampineses. In search of Darren, a fight breaks out between the Vampineses and the Freaks. Soon, Mr. Tall intervenes to break the fight. Then, the Vampineses come to Evra and Rebecca to deliver the message to Darren that it's time to come home. The following morning, Darren walks through the camp while everyone stares at him in disgust. Upon entering the tent, Everett tells Darren that Merlot took Rebecca, so Darren prepares to go after her. Meanwhile, Steve and Mr. Tiny kidnap Darren's family, leaving a flyer for the Cirque du Freak at Darren's former home. During all of this, Crepsley receives Darren's message of departure through Octa, and he starts to prepare for the fight. He takes out his leather brace and borrows the knives from Alexander. Later that night, Darren makes his way toward the theater, where we see Darren's family and Rebecca being hung by the ropes. Furthermore, Steve emerges on the stage and becomes joyful upon seeing Darren. But the insecurities pop up between them, and they both start to argue. The argument breaks into a fight when Darren refuses to drink blood. Steve then throws Darren into the craters. Moments later, Crepsley arrives there and indulges in a fight with Merlot. During all this, Rebecca frees herself using her monkey tail and offers Darren a taste of her blood. After some hesitation, he accepts. Crepsley stabs Merlot. With his dying words, Merlot declares that the truce between the two vampire clans has been broken. Mr. Tiny, who had been watching from the balcony via opera glasses, eventually separates Steve and Darren. Darren asks Steve to stay with him, but Steve refuses, saying, "I have my destiny, and you have yours." Steve then leaves with Tiny, who plans to groom him as a Vampanese leader. Crepsley returns Darren's family to their home, hypnotizing them so they'll forget what they've been through. Rebecca and Darren then share a heartfelt kiss before returning to the campgrounds. In the final scene of the movie, we see Crepsley give Darren a coffin to sleep in, and Darren accepts his new life as a member of the Cirque du Freak. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment helps out tremendously. If you fancy more videos, check out this video now.